eloquent and hopefully humorous and witty and entertaining as well.
Mr Chair.
The Honourable Stephen Joyce.
Mr Chair, I thank you for that assistance and direction as we look at the annual review, and I think it's probably going to be very helpful for the opposition in particular, because it appears from that last 5-minute offering from Mr Nash that their only economic policy seems to be the R&D tax credits that they've had for the last 3
Point of order, Mr Speaker.
Point of order, the Honourable David Parker.
I think it's completely inappropriate for the Minister in his first contribution to do exactly the opposite of what you just admonished the opposition and the prior National Party Speaker for doing. And I would suggest that you call the Minister to order.
Oh, thank you. The member for his support. I don't require to call him to order because he's already had that. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr Chair. I will now address my comments in particular to the annual review of the Treasury and financial statements of the government, Mr Chair. And I will focus on that as against the previous speaker because, Mr Chair, that is a very good context for this House's discussion over the next 10 hours. And, Mr Chair, the committee's report made it clear that the New Zealand economy is going very well at the moment, one of the strongest performing economies in the world since the global financial crisis. Mr Chair, it was noted that we've had positive growth now for some years, and in fact I can tell the House that we have had positive growth in every quarter but one over those last 6 years. That's a very good performance, and when you line this country up against countries like the US, like Japan, like Canada, like the EU, like Australia, we were in fact the 5th fastest growing economy in the world, in the developed world last year, Mr Chair. And that is actually coming into higher incomes and more jobs for Kiwis, Mr Chair. And I would like to report for the House, given some inaccurate data reported recently, that the New Zealand employment rate, the rate of employment of adult New Zealanders, everybody over the age of 15, is now at 66.9%, just under 70%, which is our highest rate ever, and actually one of the highest in the developed world. And also we have a very big margin of employment over Australia currently, and a big margin of full-time employment New Zealand over Australia. So that shows how a strong economy flows through for Kiwis around the country, Mr Chair. And the good news is that the forecasts are that this will continue. The Secretary of the Treasury was talking to the committee about the prognosis for the New Zealand economy, and I too had my opportunity to speak to the committee and lay out the Reserve Bank predictions for quite solid economic growth, an average of 3% over the next 4 years, Mr Chair. So why is that happening? Well, we did traverse that at the committee, and the committee itself traversed it. And New Zealand's economic growth story is driven by a number of things. Firstly, the strong fiscal performance and fiscal policy of this government, the orthodox monetary policy that this government adopts, and I think New Zealand has shown that it's important that monetary, fiscal and microeconomic policy works well together if you get a good result for Kiwis. And Mr Speaker, Mr Chair, a number of things that this government is particularly focused on. Firstly is trade, and we have made a particular emphasis on taking advantage of the opportunities of the big growth in middle-income consumers through Asia, and we have a trade-friendly government which is encouraging companies to export with organisations like New Zealand Trade and Enterprise, Callaghan Innovation. And despite the dairy decline over the last few years, New Zealand's exports have in fact grown, Mr Chair. Secondly, we have seen an increasing growth in our working age population, and that's actually really important because we've got a lot of companies that want to grow currently, and in order to grow they need to keep hiring skilled people. And we have the opportunity, Mr Chair, because not only is our education system delivering more graduates, but our immigration system is encouraging skilled migrants to come to New Zealand to work for our companies. Thirdly, Mr Chair, New Zealand firms are becoming more innovative. And I'm not sure, why the member of the opposition picked on this, because actually the story of New Zealand's R&D is one of growing research and development. In fact, The example that Mr Nash raised is of a company called Rocket Lab, which is indeed the beneficiary of this government's R&D investment policies alongside Callaghan Innovation. So it's slightly ironic for the opposition to raise that in criticism. Mr Chair, also we've seen active encouragement of private sector investment in this country, which is important. And then finally, Mr Chair, the public infrastructure that we need for growth, and we talked about that in the House earlier this afternoon. Mr Chair, this government is delivering strong economic growth.
Fletcher Tabuteau.